finished before your audience. Oh. Out there, see? I'll wait. I don't really know everybody here. I've got one of the elders asked me to say some stuff for this one guy, and I don't know which one he is. Well, I just tell it to everybody. No, I'm kidding. They didn't. Okay, so I'm going to share another story. You remember the story I was telling you about Angel who was afraid she would quit, and we told her we'd honor her and we wouldn't let her quit. So Angel calls me one day and says, I have. Is that okay? So Angel calls me one day and says, my brother is in the hospital. Would you go see him? Be healed. Maybe. Test. That sounds on, doesn't it? Yeah. It's like my kid. Oh, it's green. It's like my kid, my dogs, my grandkids. I say it, but they don't listen. They go right off. No, I'm kidding. Okay, so that's still going. Okay, we're going to assume it's going to stay this time. Okay, so she calls and says, you go see my brother Wes in the hospital. Now, you get calls like that, and you never know where those kind of calls are going to go. So you say, sure, I would love to do that, and sometimes it turns into a really neat thing, and sometimes you just go see him, that's it. But I went up and said, hi, Wes, my name is Steve. I go to church with your sister, Angel. And she told me you were in the hospital. She heard from your wife, and she wanted me to come visit you. He said, my sister Angel? I said, yeah. Don't you have a sister Angel? He said, yeah, but she asked you to come see me. Yes. Angel? Yes. So he said, well, okay. I said, so we talked a little bit, and he said, I'm kind of sick, but I'll get better. And I said, well, would you like to? Angel thought you might want to talk about your Jesus journey. We've helped her on hers, and as you may have heard, she was born again, and we'd be happy to visit with you about it. And he said, no, I don't think but when I get out, maybe we will, so we'll see. So he gets out. I call and say, hey, this is Steve, saw you in the hospital. He said, yeah, we'll get around to it, but not now. Okay, he goes back in the hospital. His wife, Thelma, calls Angel and says, hey, can you get that guy to go see him again? She said, sure, I'll call him. I go see him. I said, so you're back in? He said, yeah, I think it's bad this time. He said, maybe we ought to talk about that Jesus thing you were talking about. And I said, I'd love to. You want to do it now? No, but when I get out, we're going to do that. Okay. So he gets out, and when he gets out, here's what they have told him. You have stage 4 cancer. It is bad. We cannot treat it here. We're going to send you to Scott and White. We have sent them all of your records and tests. They will have a comprehensive plan of treatment, but it's going to be long and hard, and we don't know how successful it's going to be. Okay, so we're talking about that, and he says, so I want to get that, but he said, then we're going to talk. Okay. The day before they're supposed to leave, Scott and White calls him and says, Wes, do not come. He says, you need to reschedule, and they said, no, we reviewed all of your stuff. There is no treatment plan. You need to get your affairs in order, and quickly. So he calls me and says, I may be too late, but I guess I'm ready for that talk. So I start going over to Wes and Thelma's house. And we start visiting. And it's very hard to converse with Wes because he is taking chemo and he's sick. And so it was hard for him to talk. And so we'd talk a little bit. He'd throw up. We'd clean him up, or he'd have to go to the bathroom. And that didn't go well sometimes. And he would doze off in the middle of our conversation. So 20-minute conversations took 2 hours. So we're visiting with Wes. And one day he says, I got to tell you something. Okay, what? He said, I was baptized. Well, first he said, do you know I was in prison? I said, well, yeah. Yeah. He said, well, you know I was baptized there? I said, really? He said, yeah. And he said, me and Jesus were really close in prison. And I said, really? He said, yeah. I even sang in the prison choir. I do not know what that meant. Didn't care. I said, that's great. Good for you. So what happened? He said, well, I got out, and Thelma and I got married. And he said, just about 3 weeks, I was back in my old life. Thelma was in the kitchen and said, it wasn't because of me. He didn't say that, Thelma, you know. But he said, and she said, and it's not as bad as he's saying. And he looked at me and he said, it was worse. And she'll know after I'm gone how bad it was. Okay. And she did. She found a lot of stuff that she's not going to, it was bad. But he said, here's my question. He said, I know I'm dying. You're going to think this is anybody on his deathbed. But here's my question. Can I be forgiven? So we spent a lot of time over the next week talking about the prodigal son, talking about lost sheep, talking about the end of James where it says if you're sick, have the elders come pray with you, anoint with oil, and the prayer of a righteous, all that stuff. If he's sinned, it will be forgiven. 1 John 1, you know, if you confess your sins, he's faithful and just. We talked about all of that. So as we're going through all these conversations, he eventually had 2 questions. One is, he said, that thing you read in one of those books about putting all prayer, I said, I know what you're talking about. He said, would your elders, where Angel goes, would they come do that? And I said, yes, sure will. So 3 of our elders and I showed up, and they anointed him with oil, prayed over him, read words of forgiveness out of Scripture, very emotional, very sweet. And then he said, I have another question. Okay, what? And he said, did Angel tell you anything? And I said, let me tell you what Angel told me. Before she was baptized, she told me y'all grew up in a really hard home. A lot of alcohol, a lot of abuse, a lot of abusing and being abusive. And he said, she didn't tell you the half of it, did she? I said, doesn't matter. I said, I'm here to tell you she's forgiven because God washed her sins away, just like you did when you were baptized, and now you're coming home. And he said, not much homecoming. I'll be dead in a week. I said, no, but you are going to be forgiven when that time comes. And he said, well, I just didn't know what she told you. So I tell my wife, she calls Angel and said, you know, he was asking about that. And she said, I want to go see him, but I don't know if I can. Now, y'all are filling in the blanks just like everybody else can. And I said, how about if Marcia and I go with you? And she said, okay, I'd like to go see my brother before he dies. So we go in. I'm on this side of the bed by Wes. Thelma, his wife, is laying with him on the bed. And then Marcia's with Angel, and they're right there. So I didn't hear quite all of this, but Marcia said it went like this. Angel walked in. Wes looked up and said, honey, I'm so, so sorry. And she said, I forgive you because of Jesus. They hugged, they cried a lot, and she said, I'm going to tell our siblings that you're dying. He said, they won't come. And he said, and frankly, some of them, I don't know if I want to come. And she said, can I tell them anyhow? There were about 8 of them. He said, yeah. 4 of them showed up over the next 3 days. Same thing, a lot of asking forgiveness, forgiving, praying, crying. And then Wes passed. And so Thelma called Angel and said, I don't know what to do. Can your church do funerals? And Angel said, yes, we can. Then she called Marcia and said, can we do funerals? Like, yes. And Marcia said, yes, we can. So we did, put together a video clip of Wes. I did the funeral. We had singers sing. We invited her family to come. Did ask 2 of them to leave their handguns in the car. They had them, and we're coming in with them. And that might have been, I mean, it's Texas, so, you know, maybe, but still, we said, you never know. And talked about Angel's conversion and Wes's coming home. Now, all his siblings didn't show, but a lot of them did. So about a week later, his wife is just so appreciative. So about a week later, Marcia and I went by to see Thelma to say, hey, how you doing? What's going on? And she said, I want to ask you something. Sure. She said, why'd y'all do all that? I said, well, That's because Jesus has been good to us, and that's what his people do. And Angel's part of our community of faith. So if Angel's family needs something, we're her people. And she said, okay, I don't know what all's involved in this, but here's the deal. I want to be part of Angel's church. Anybody will be that. I need that. That's what I want to be. I want to be part of it. So we studied with Thelma, baptized her into Christ. Here's why I tell you that. You never know when out of a horrible situation, somebody's going to say, do you mind visiting? And you say something about Jesus. And of course he said no. And then he said no again. Then he said no again. But finally he said yes. And you never know when somebody's going to be receptive enough to say, hey, I need to talk about this. And you never know when somebody's going to say, she didn't know one thing about any of our doctrine. Not anything. I don't even know if she knew where Hillcrest was then. All she knew was we showed up when Angel's people needed help. And we helped her. By the way, we even paid for the funeral. Gardner, you remember Gardner? They're a, I don't know if y'all have things like this in boys. We have a discount funeral home. I mean, they do the cheap ones. And we do a lot of business with them, so they give us a reduced rate. And we just, Thelma said, I can't even pay that. And we're like, we'll find the money. Okay, every elder in here, please cover your ears. I don't know, your ministers would never do this. We occasionally make promises and then go into the elders meeting and say, by the way, do we have any money for? We said we'd do this. And our elders are great. They're like, you can't do that. No, we don't. Of course we will. I'm like, okay, yeah, okay. And I'll never do it again. And they just roll their eyes. I don't know why they do that. But because somebody cared. And since then, Thelma has been incredibly active and faithful. And it really has helped Angel. And they are bringing a couple of their siblings now are coming to church. Hadn't agreed to talk about Jesus, but they show up the Jesus journey. But I also need to tell you this, because I believe in truth in advertising, so you need to hear this. Jesus said in Matthew 13, there are 4 things that happen when you sow seed. So I'm going to tell you, when you talk about Jesus, there are 4 things that will. It is not 1 out of 4. I hear people say, hey, I've had 3 or 4 people say no, so that means, no, these are just 4 outcomes. Jesus does not say 1 out of 4 is this way. Here are the 4 outcomes. One of them is you try to talk to somebody, and it's just like seed on rocky soil. Birds get it, doesn't take. You ever tried that with somebody? Hey, would you like to come to church? No. Why are you doing this? Well, because it's Jesus. Would you like to hear why? No. Can I tell you my Jesus? No. Well, do you have I can explain. No. Okay, that happens sometimes. You know what? Jesus said that happened. I don't figure my job's to go look for the right one. It's just to tell everybody. Just tell everybody. Everybody. Second thing that can happen is, boy, they get all excited, they jump in, you convert them, and then they fall away quickly because there's no depth, no root. Now, that used to haunt me, and I'm a big believer in discipling. I think we ought to try to ground our people and encourage them and get them involved, but Jesus himself said some of them just don't. You ever seen that? You baptize somebody and they're all excited, and boy, the first month they never miss anything, and then you can't find them. When you go try to look them down, they don't want to talk to you, and you're just like, well, man. Okay, Jesus said sometimes that happens. I don't want that to ever be our fault. I'm just going to tell you, you know what, sometimes all you can do is all you can do. And then there are some that are there, but they're never productive because the troubles in this world and the love of money keep them from being productive for Jesus. I don't know what your most popular ministry is, but it was true when we were elders at Southern Hills, and it was true at Hillcrest. Both places, oddly enough, our most popular ministry is the same one. We have more people in this ministry than any other thing we do. It's the sit on the pew and do nothing ministry. It's our most popular. Every church I go to, that's the most popular ministry. I don't think it's always because they don't care. It's just things get in the way. You ever made commitments that, hey, I'm going to do this, and boy, I'm fired up. I'm glad Steve was here. This is what I've been wanting to do. Boy, here I go. Let's get after it. And then 3 weeks later, you hadn't said anything to anybody. There was the kids' game, and then work. There's a little pressure at work, and then somebody's got to get the kids' class ready Sunday. We're not going to have one, and I had to set out all the food for the snacks, and I did this. And besides, don't we have a staff that'll do that? And Good intentions, but just the trouble of the world. Our love of money kind of crowds that out. But the fourth result is you get an angel or a Joseph, and they are productive for the kingdom. And that's why we're doing this. We're not doing this so everybody say, wow, those people at Linder Road, how great are they? Wow. That's not why we're doing it. We're not doing this so that others will call you in and give you the Evangelist of the Month sticker. We're not. You know why we're doing this? Because there are people who are separated from God and will not live with Him forever unless somebody tells them the good news of Jesus. You cannot control the results. But when I look at this, I'm reminded we are seed sowers, not soil testers. Don't fall into that. Man, they would be go talk to them because they'll be really receptive. We need somebody like that, and how great would that be? Or, no use talking to them because they wouldn't be interested in Jesus. You don't know. Sow seed everywhere. It's like the defensive lineman was such a good player because they said, man, how do you always get the ball carried? He said, I just tackle everybody in sight and let the referee sort it out. Tell everybody about Jesus, and God will do the increase. He will. So, here are some of the stories I love to tell about Jesus. Now, I'm going to go ahead and tell you this before I get into these stories. I typically don't always target stories unless it's set up for me. I mean, if somebody says, hey, God didn't want me like me because I've been married a whole bunch and I'm living with a guy. And, okay, I have a story for you. But typically I just say, hey, we'll just tell Jesus stories. And I just pick one of the ones I'm fixing to share with you. But this is one of my favorite ones for a number of reasons. The woman at the well out of John 4. This really does fit, though, the people that are living a life that they know is a mess. They don't feel good about their life. They've had consequences. They are offenders or ex-offenders. And they do have I don't know how it works in Idaho, by the way, but the picture of John being baptized when Joseph was in there, that is where Hillcrest discovered that ankle bracelets, when you're on parole, are waterproof. We called because we did not know. I called, and they know us at the parole department, by the way. We have a good reputation, and they know us. And I don't know about Idaho, but in Texas, parolees can't be out past a certain time. You have to know where they are. So I said, I know they can shower in these. Can they stand in the baptistry in these? And they said, oh yeah, Hillcrest, you guys are dunkers, aren't you? Yes, we are. So can Joseph at that time, can he stand in there? John may have had one too then. And they said, yes, they can. So that's how we found out ankle bracelets are waterproof. Who knew? So there are people that just like, and this story is a great story for them. Because I'm a quick step through this. Because remember, this woman had been married several times and was living with the guy. Not only that, but she drew water at noon when everybody else knows all the other women go draw early in the morning because, well, you want your water to start your day and it's cooler. And if you're in West Texas, you go at 4 in the morning because she went, everybody else goes when it's cool and start their day. She shows up at noon. So I've heard a lot of sermons on this. I'm going to tell you, I think it was one of two things. It's just Steve's opinion. So you know much that's worth exactly, well, nothing. But here it is anyhow. Either they made her feel bad. You know, somebody like me can't, because, you know, she walks up and they're all looking and she can hear them saying this. You know, she's living with that guy. And, you know, I mean, don't let your husband around her because, boy, she is a man-eater. And, you know, I hear they made her feel so shunned she wouldn't go. I would like to think our churches aren't like that. But I can't tell you how many people who said, you know, I'm pretty tatted up. Do I fit in your church? We're like, yeah, the tattoo section's right over there. There's, you know. Or, you know, I'm kind of embarrassed because if I cross my leg, my ankle bracelet shows. Right over there. You know, I've kind of had a bad life. Oh, sit by me then. You know, people, we don't mean to in church, but look at us. We have it all together. You know, that's why I love churches that say, hey, Leroy, I remember this. For a long time, with the church we served at together, we had a reputation in town for where all the screwed up people show up because we had a lot of them. And I kind of thought that was a compliment. I did. Hillcrest gets that now for you guys saw all the people that can't make it in the world. Yeah, they do. And we like that. So her life was, or here's the other thing could have happened. They didn't say anything, but she felt it. You ever felt like I'm not good enough to be with? I can't be in this kind of company. I'm not. It's like old Tom, the roof would cave in on me. That's a great story to show at Jesus. Because, but didn't Jesus kind of say, hey, I know about you. That's not what he said. You know what Jesus, you know how he said it? He said, when you tell me you're not married, I know. I know you were married a bunch. I know you're living with a guy. And I still love you. And I still want to give you living water. That was not okay, you're right, you're not married, and boy, do I know how messed up you are. And if there's ever anybody that needed me, it is you. So he didn't do it. Jesus doesn't do it like that. And we don't either. We are not going to be those that say, we deal with people messed up. And I've literally, I'll tell you a story in a minute, but I had people say Jesus really cared. Yeah, he did. He does about everybody. So the people that have a bad past, the people whose life is not what we think it should be, those are the people that need Jesus. And even when I know that never happens up here, and when she tried to raise a doctrinal issue, because it was getting kind of, this whole Jesus, living water, changing your life, it's getting a little close to home. So she says, wait, let me ask you a doctrinal question about worship. I heard Idaho doesn't have those kind of spits and spats about how you ought to worship. But some people still want to argue that. Okay, man, so I know Jesus changed my life. Whoa! Why don't y'all have an organ? Do y'all do fast songs or slow songs? High songs or low songs? Do y'all do any contemporary stuff? And you do know every song you sing tomorrow is contemporary, right? No, we sing songs from a long time ago, but when they were written, they were, of course they were, yeah. So and Jesus said, no, let me tell you, God's looking for the people that worship Him in spirit and truth. Now, I take that to be Holy Spirit, and Jesus is the way, the truth. So I take that. He very much was saying, this is about me, not about worship doctrine, about me. And then here's where I really like when she said, well, okay, when Jesus comes, or when the Messiah comes, he says, that's me. You're talking to him. And remember what she does? Drops something, runs into town, and tells everybody her story. Listen, I was out there. This guy, he knew this, and he knew about this, he knew everything about me, and he still wanted living water, and this is great, and I think we found the Messiah. And the whole town rushes out because of her testimony. And they say, we came out because of what she said. We are staying to hear what you say. So let me remind you of a couple of things. That is a great story for people with checkered past. It's a great story that Jesus is living water. It's a great story that He will quench that hunger you've got inside of you. And for the people that have filled that hunger with alcohol or sex or money or food or whatever they've tried to fill that emptiness with, that's the great story to say Jesus will fill your life. He will, because we know that. But you need to know, telling your story is powerful. I'm amazed. I mean, it's like the guy walks into class. How'd you know about Hillcrest? Well, Joseph was in jail with me. He said, come here. Wow. That's powerful. And you need to know that when you're studying with someone, you don't want them to follow Jesus because of you. We want them to follow Jesus because of who He is. We're not making Church of Christers. We're not making followers of Richard. We're not making Clintites. Ooh, that kind of has a ring to it, by the way, Clint. Yeah, I kind of like that. I don't want you to like it, but Clintite kind of has that. That's a good ring, yeah. We want to make Christians, Jesus followers. So I think that's just a great story for a lot of reasons. So, her name was Joan. Joan grew up going to a number of churches. She will say, somebody in the neighborhood would come by and say, come to VBS or come to church, and they said they'd pick me up. My mom wanted me to the house, so I'd go. She told me, I said, I was even baptized. And I said, really, where? I can't remember which church. Why? I don't know. All I remember is some lady said, a bunch of kids are getting baptized, you ought to. So I got in line, and, it obviously didn't take, but she said, so I had some church background. As Joan grew up, she got married, and it didn't work, and had a teenage daughter who took her own life. She said, at some point, I just decided there was no God. In a world like this, there was no God. It's just, that's too far-fetched. But she said, I woke up one day, and he said it had been about 10 years since I decided that. And I thought, I don't think there's a God. But I wonder why people are so convinced. So she said, I decided to send an email to 10 family members who I thought either were Christians or claimed to be Christians. And so I sent them all an email that said this: I don't believe in God. I don't think He is real. But I would like you or somebody that's really smart and can explain it well to sit down and tell me the case for God. I don't think it'll matter. I just would like to hear it. She got 3 answers back. Now, roll that one around a little bit. Sent it to 10 people who she thought were Christians or claimed to be. Now, she's real generous. She says, maybe I had the wrong email. Maybe they didn't get it. I mean, she's really sweet, but that's pretty indicting. Because when she told me that, you could still hear the hurt in her voice. 2 of them answered and said, I don't know anybody and I don't know really what to say, but I believe and I'll pray for you. Well, that's better than nothing, but still not what she was asking. Her cousin, Joan is the short one, cousin's the tall one. She said, we go to church with a guy who I think does this. I don't know if he's very smart. Yeah, that was me. I was like, geez. And she said, but he likes to talk about Jesus. And I checked him out with one of my friends who said, no, he's fantastic. She called Tim Yandell and said, what do you think about Steve? And Tim's like, yes, of course. So we met Joan. And we just said, we'll just tell Jesus stories. So she'd come over and we'd tell the Jesus story and talk about life. And she and Marcia got along well because Joan always brought Diet Coke or Diet Dr. Pepper, and that was good. And they talked about life, and we talked about Jesus. And one night we were sitting there, she looked up and she said, it is real, isn't it? And I said, yes, it is. And she said, I probably need to be baptized, don't I? And I said, you need to be born again if you want to be in the kingdom of God. And she said, okay, but I want to do that. And I said, so, I do this all the time. Because I want to tell people, what was it? And she said, I don't know. She said, Marcia was always sweet and nice, and you were just blah, 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 Jesus. I'm like, okay, at least you got the main point. So, yeah. But she said, you know what did it? It was that story about that lady that had been married and then was living with that guy. I said, yeah, what about it? And she said, I just realized Jesus really cared about her. And she said, I think all this time when I've told him I didn't believe, and through the death of my daughter and all the mess and stuff in my life, I think he still really loves me, doesn't he? And I said, you exactly get it. And so we baptized Joan. Story gets better. She met a guy from high school, reconnected with a guy from high school who was a Christian but had fallen away, had been away a long time, came back to church. They got married, came to church together. An issue from his past caught up with him, and he's currently incarcerated. But he got a whole church family through Joan because our whole Jesus Journey class writes him letters, and Joan comes to church with us. She had a hard time for a while when her husband went to prison. But she finally said, God still loves me and still loves him. I said, yes, he does. And what got him was not when he was married to her, it was from his past when he was drinking heavily before he came back to the Lord. So you never know when somebody's going to, out of the blue, send you an email that says, I don't think I believe, but can you tell me why you do? Or somebody's going to say, listen, one of my friends asked about, can you help me? What do you think I ought to? That's why I love doing this, because you've got resources. If you say, what story do I tell, or what can I say, or how, come ask your elders and preachers. Text me. They all got my number. I'll tell you, you can find help, but that's the key. Her cousin, and by the way, this is another way you do Jesus messages. That's a Facebook post from a few years ago when Joan said, sometimes I forget to thank the people who make my life so happy in so many ways. Sometimes I forget to tell them how much I really appreciate them being an important part of my life. Thank you, all of you, just for being here for me. And that's her and her cousin Leanne and her baptism, and then Marcia and I with Joan. And she got some interest from that and told some people about Jesus. So you never know where it goes. Here's another one of my favorite stories. I love the story of the blind man. I'm going to quick step this one too. But here's why this is a great story. It starts with the disciples. They see theology, and Jesus sees a person who's blind. Think that. Go back and read the first part of that story. Their big question is, who was the sinner that made him like that? And Jesus is like, no, this is so he can do works of God. Boy, think about it. John, the crippled guy that I told you his story. John's big question forever has been, but I'm crippled. I don't know all that. What good am I to God? And so we've talked a lot about your example as a faithful Christian, your prayer life, your coming to the Lord. It's a great, we tell his, well, I tell it in Idaho. We tell his story everywhere. And I'll go back and talk to him about that. What's my purpose? What's my reason? And Jesus says, hey, this guy's going to do, and he has. The blind man's story is still being told all these years later. So look at people, not theology always. But the other thing is, there's a couple other things you can talk about. He met him where he was, didn't force himself. Hey, you got to love this story. I mean, he's hearing this theological debate, and then he hears this. Oh, the Bible doesn't say that. Well, it does say he spit on the ground. So, and I figured the guy did this because I figured he'd been spit at before. And then right after that, he feels mud pies in his eye. Now, I told you I'm not real bright, but if I hear and then I feel mud, I'm like, oh, geez. And so I'm either doing this, I don't know who that was, but buddy, or I'm doing this. Great. That's just great. And then he says, go wash it off. Not give me the deacons over eye washing for today, be an elders meeting tonight where we're going to do cleansing of mud. None of that. Go wash it off. And I know Jesus knows people better. It's hard not to push people when they're not quite ready. I have a grandson that's 18, graduated from high school last year, going to trade school, wants to weld, or I don't know what all he's going to do. But his mom, y'all know Julie, obviously. His mom went through a horrible first marriage, converted her husband. They did great for about 5 years. Leroy was one of their elders. And then he started drinking again and started beating my daughter and his kids. And eventually they divorced, and she went through a really, really hard time. Well, that scarred her son pretty bad. She's now remarried to a great guy who's a believer who does 90% of the ranch work, so I love him. But Jake comes to church every Sunday, comes to the journey class, is involved, lives everything except he won't be born again. It's like he's standing on the edge of baptistry, and it is all we can do except for the fact that he's huge and muscled up, and I couldn't do it. But I just want to go grab him and say, I don't care, I'm going to baptize you. You can't push people until they're ready. He will do it. It will come. It's just, and we find out we have a lot of people like, you want to study? No, not now. Wes? No, when I get out. Okay, you're out. No, not now. You're in again. How about now? Well, when I get out this. Okay, when we've got them lined up all over that we've got on the edge of the road, not ready to go through the gate on the road. And you know what? I love Jesus for this. Hey, he's not ready to hear everything, so I'm just going to tell him this. Here, go wash it off. And of course he does, and they have the debate about, is this the guy who was born blind, or does he just look like him? When you follow Jesus, things change. And I tell people that. There will be people that will say, what happened to you? Is this the same guy I always knew? Because it does change. His family did not support him. That's a good time to talk about. All your friends and family may not buy into your new Jesus guy. They may not. Actually, we had a guy, we didn't convert him, but he came back to the Lord after 50 years. Came home. And about 3 weeks in, he was sitting with a couple of us, and he said, you know what, if I'm going to do this Jesus thing, I just realized I got to get brand new friends. And that's true for a lot. Gary Rice, by the way. Y'all remember Gary and Jana? Jana always came by herself. Gary never came with her. They're at Hillcrest, and he has come home. So that's a neat thing. So when they're talking, so his parents don't support him. And then you watch the guy just progress into, look, and finally he does the great statement of all time. I don't know all the stuff you're asking, but one thing I know, I was blind. And you know the point of that for you talking to your friends, your neighbors, your family members about Jesus? Look, I don't know all the answers, and I know we hadn't always done this right, but one thing I can tell you, I was lost, now I'm found. I was dead, now I'm alive. I was blind, now I see. I was lame, now I walk. You can phrase that a million ways. In your life, the difference Jesus has made for you. And that's basically what that guy learns to do. And of course, it's great when they finally, the religious leaders throw him out and Jesus finds him and says, hey, and he says, that's me. And he fell down and worshiped. People, you keep planting seeds and you think you're watering them and you're like, man, is this ever going to pay off? And then sometimes it does. So I love that story because it's a really good story to talk about, hey, I don't know where you are on your journey, and God does have great things for you to do. And everybody's not going to be supportive, but Jesus is. So it's a great story. Now, I use the story. This is probably the story I use more than any of them, partly because of who we work with. For people on the fringe, marginal people, addicts, ex-offenders, this is the great story. And frankly, for any of us that have kind of wrestled with our demons, and most of us have, our demons may look different, but most of us have had that time we've had to fight our demons. This is the great story out of Mark 5. The story of Legion, the social outcast, lonely, depressed, cuts himself. That fits in our, that's a big cultural phenomenon. Especially, it was huge a few years ago among preteen girls, cutting, little cuts here and there, used X-Acto knives a lot to do that. He does all that. He knows something about Jesus, and Jesus gets there and interacts with him. Remember, he asked him his name. He's saying, what do you want with me? I think the what do you want with me is a lot deeper. And what are you doing? I think it's, I got all these demons. Nobody likes me. I'm isolated. What does the Son of God want to do with me? Jesus wasn't scared of his demons. Cast them out. A couple of reasons I love that story. One of the things that I do about, 2, 3, sometimes 4 times a year. You remember the old gospel meetings? Well, I do storytelling events sometimes. We'll come in and do a Sunday night, Monday night, Tuesday night storytelling event where we just tell everybody, bring your non-believing friends. Not going to be threatening, not going to be churchy. We're just going to tell Jesus stories. And this is the one I tell more than any of them because it is the story of a Jesus that's not scared of your stuff. And it is the story of a Jesus who can defeat your demons. And it is the story of a Jesus that cares who you are. And it is the story of a Jesus who knows he can use you in the kingdom. And that's what people hunger for. Can you fix my life? Can my life have any meaning and purpose? And this is the great story for that. And of course, at the end, you remember what happens at the end. remember what he did with the demons? Put them in the pigs and they go running off and drown. And the guys sitting there go, hey, this is Jesus. Here comes Legion. This is going to be epic. They're talking. What are they talking about? I don't know if the pigs are restless. The pigs. So they go to town and tell everybody. Well, duh. And everybody comes out to see. And here's Legion in his right mind, dressed, talking to Jesus. And they are scared. And they ask Jesus to leave. I don't think this will happen at Linder Road, but I've been places where I've literally thought, you know what? They don't want any part of this. They want to talk about it, but they don't really want a bunch of non-believers showing up in the church like they've got it done, like they are happy with. Because they are messy and they have a lot of questions. And you're liable in the middle of church to have one jump up and yell, praise God. And you have to say, we don't do that here. Oh, I'm sorry, you should. Or, right in the middle, they're going to go, what? No, what? What is this stuff? What? Or, man, it's just over and over and over. They're messy and they're hard and they're passionate and they will bring their friends by the droves. So, I love a lot of things because when they tell Jesus to leave, here's another reason I love this story. When somebody says, well, so I say, no, if you don't want Jesus, he's not going to make you. He's going to invite you, and if you don't want him, he'll go. He may leave because he did there. Well, I don't know if I want him to leave, then you ought to do something about him then. But Legion wanted to go with him. Remember, he wouldn't let him. Legion says, hey, I want to go be a missionary. And Jesus says, nope. Go tell your family what the Lord has done for you. So what are you telling me about all this? I'm telling you, that's how you start. That's what we're going to work on tomorrow, your story. But always what you can share is, I have a great marriage because of Jesus. I'm clean and sober because of Jesus. I am what because of Jesus. I was healed because of Jesus. no, I've got stage 4 cancer and apparently it's not getting better and I'm going to live forever because of Jesus. I don't know where your story starts, but you tell your friends and your family what the Lord has done for you. So one more story and then a couple of practical things. We'll take a short break and then we'll finish. So Jimmy and Janie Moreno and a guy named Ken Jones. Jimmy and Janie. Janie worked at a Dairy Queen in Texas. Y'all have Dairy Queens up here? Okay, she worked at a Dairy Queen, ran a Dairy Queen in Texas. Had gotten to know Ken Jones, who went to Southern Hills with us, because Ken ate there a lot. And they could be friends. Janie became a Christian, but not Jimmy. Jimmy was born Catholic, and he was going to die Catholic, and he proved it by showing up and sleeping through Mass every Christmas and Easter. I mean, he'll tell you that. Showed up twice a year, slept through it, and went on my business. They had a son named Michael. Michael was bipolar. And so when he was on his meds, he functioned pretty well. He got off his meds, got out on the streets, lived on the streets, and it became messy. They bought a new house, had a bedroom in it for Michael for when he was home and doing well. He would be in and out, and one night they came in, walked in, and they have kind of a table in their entryway where they lived then. Walked in and looked on that table, and there was a handwritten thing from Michael. And it had quotes from the Sermon on the Mount, and then in a different color pen, it would say things like, I know there's a better life, I can't find it. I know there is a light, I'm trying to get to it, but I just can't get there. Then more Sermon on the Mount, and then I've tried, I don't think you can find that in this life. So I've got to go where that light is calling. Then more Sermon on the Mount, and they finally realized that could be a very dangerous letter. Ran back to his bedroom, and Michael was dead. They went back and forth for a while trying to decide if it was accidental or intentional, but dead. They called their friend Ken Jones because they didn't know any other Christians. Called Ken and said, here's what's happening. Ken went over there. Ken will tell you he didn't know what to do, but he just started praying with them. So time passed, and Ken told us about it, and we said, well, would they like to tell? We've got a lot of members who have lost adult children, and they would be happy to visit with them, but they wouldn't talk to anybody. We had some of our people write them cards and letters, which was kind of cool. Wouldn't talk to anybody. One day, Jimmy said this to Ken, do you have any priesty kind of guys at your church? Ken said, well, I think we're kind of all priests, but we've got elders who kind of lead our church. Jimmy said, well, you think any of them would come over and pray through our house? We want the demons out. We want the evil out. We want the pain out. Would anybody do that? Ken said, I think we have one. And that's how we met, Jimmy and Janie. I don't know. We didn't get a lot of calls like that I remember, Leroy. I don't know about your elders, how many of y'all get for priesty elders, but Jimmy still refers to me as the priesty elder guy. So, okay. And we're at Hillcrest. I'm not an elder there, but for Jimmy, I always will be. So we go over there. Marcia, me, Jimmy and Janie, and Ken. And Ken is a big man. And Jimmy's a big guy. Went through every room in their house and prayed. The only time, the guest bathroom was a little awkward, but we got in there and prayed in every room. And what we prayed for was for peace to be in that house, for there to be love in that house, for God to keep evil away from that house, for God to protect them, those kind of things. And looking back, somebody says, well, shouldn't you have explained to them our theology of demonology? What good would that have done them? They wanted to pray, so we prayed. Got through going to the living room, and after I declined Jimmy's sweet offer of a beer, he said, can I ask you something? I'm like, yeah, you ask me anything. What do you want to ask? And he said, where's Michael? So we said, we need to set up an 8-week Bible study on the importance of heaven and hell. I said, you know what? I don't know. I'm not God. God decides where Michael is. I can tell you, and it is right, Michael was clearly seeking. He clearly was not in his right mind. He couldn't process, but he was wanting something better. So God knows his heart. So he said, so he's in heaven. I said, okay, let me try this one more time. I'm not God. Where Michael is God's business. But I can tell you, if he is in heaven, I can tell you how you can see him again. How? I said, Jesus, would you like to talk about Jesus? And Jimmy looked right at me and said, not with you. Like, I'm your priestly elder. I could, I said, oh, okay. And he said, no, you're a nice guy and you seem like you, but he said, I don't know you, but I know Ken. I'll talk to Ken. And Ken's just a big old rough guy. So they started meeting and talking about Jesus. And we ended up baptizing Jimmy. And he and Janie were faithful. They're over at Hillcrest with us now, and they have been faithful. And Ken has gotten where Ken's getting senile. And his wife has stage 4 cancer. And the Morenos are who takes care of them. You never know when something's going to trigger something to say, nope, not interested, and their life is a disaster. They don't know who to call. And they call you. And that's why it's a great story. So let me just remind you, last words matter. This isn't Steve's opinion. This isn't your elder's opinion. This isn't a Linder. This is Jesus said, I got all the authority. And because I got all the authority, here's what I'm telling you. Go make disciples. Somebody says, that's such a great mission passage. And we've got some guys going to Africa, and boy, when they come, we'll read that. No, I think what that is, I think he's saying you go. You walk out of the doors of this church. You walk out of the doors of your house. You walk into the doors where you work or go to school. And that's where you go to make disciples. That is his charge to us, to go out in our world and make disciples. And so they're born again, and they learn what Jesus taught us. That is not a passage. Let me be real clear. That passage is not a baptism proof text. I hear it used that way. That is not what it is. And it is not a text to say we've all got to agree on all the doctrine. It is a passage that says you go make disciples. And if you try to make it a text about doctrine, you're missing the main point. Main point is go make disciples. Yeah, but there's things they've got to know. Yeah, and he says teach them. And by the way, if you say, well, I can't remember, what do you for sure have to teach new Christians? Do what? Yeah, they need to know that. And if you tell them, they say, well, what do I have to do? Love God, love your neighbor. But there's so much more. Yeah, but I'm going to tell you, if they'll love God, you solve 90% of our theological arguments. Because if you love God, you'll listen to the Bible. You will. Yeah, but sometimes you have to explain it to them. Okay, if you can't understand it when you first read it, I'm not sure it's critical. I mean, when I told you a minute ago about the day of visit, when God visits us, or whatever that was in that passage in 1 Peter, I don't know what the day of visitation is. So if you disagree with me on it, I question your salvation. Because, I don't understand it. But, okay, there's things. If Paul says there are things hard to understand, we're not all going to agree on everything. We're not. Now, if you do have a question about any doctrine, I'll hang around. I'll be glad to answer them because I do have the right answers. In fact, I'm so convicted of that. My wife and I were going to start a church in Abilene called The Church That Gets It Right. I thought, that would attract people, and it was going great. And about 5 minutes into the discussion, I said something. She said, I don't believe that. I'm like, well, yeah, of course you do. She's like, no, I don't think you're right on that. So it blew up the whole idea. People need Jesus. You disciple them by teaching what he wanted them to know. And that's more what they do than what they know. And it is not a baptism proof text. And if you use it that way, here's the danger. We have for a long time assumed people love Jesus, and we need to convince them the truth about baptism. And when you do that, you get a bunch of wet people and not a lot of disciples. Even with our own kids, we made sure they understood what baptism was and baptized most of them and wondered why so many of them left Jesus when they grew up. Sometimes you really do get the cart before the horse. So I kind of try to tell people all about Jesus, and I just assume they're going to be baptized. Someone says, you can't do that. No, I don't know. I'd say almost everybody we talk to about Jesus ends up being baptized. It's a matter of your emphasis. If you put your emphasis on the wrong syllable, nobody understands you. Jesus. We are not the church of baptism, the church of correct doctrine. We are the church of Christ. And that, yes, and that is our description. So I just wanted to leave you with that. We're going to give you 5 minutes, and we're going to finish, because if I'm going to, Leroy's going to buy my lunch if I really work it right. So we got to get here and get through. So, all right, 5-minute break, and we're going to start again.